Today, we still need to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God.
And by God's grace, many continue to do that.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here is your host and moderator.
Welcome, viewers. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Andrea Luxton. I am today's moderator, and I am the president of Andrews University in Michigan. We have some panelists with us today, and I'd like them to introduce themselves to you.
Thank you. I'm Tom Plumbley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and I serve at First Christian Church in downtown Fort Worth, Texas.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Dan Levin. I serve as senior rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
Hi, I'm Carl Troval. I'm professor of Christian ethics at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
I'm Tony Matthews, and I'm the senior pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
We have a very important topic today, and I'm sure that you're going to really enjoy it. Here it goes. One of the most well-known and loved biblical verses is Micah 6:8. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and walk humbly with your God. In the context of the book of Micah, Micah 6:8 is a true indictment of God against his people. Despite all that God has done for them and the goodness he has modeled, the people act as though God has wearied them. They have failed to act justly, they have not acted with mercy, and they have certainly not walked humbly with their God. It is in fact as though God has not done anything for them. Micah 6:8 is used widely today in songs, sermons, and in calls to social justice, even in political campaigns. It is understood by individuals of faith to identify their responsibilities in their communities and in their lives. The context of a community that has failed in its responsibilities remains, however, a critical context of this call for action. So the panel is asked to answer at least the following questions. First of all, is the indictment of God to his people in the days of Micah an indictment he could equally level at his people today? Secondly, what does it mean to act justly, to love mercy, and walk humbly with your God in 2022? And finally, through the prophet Micah, God lists what he had done for the Israelites that they had forgotten or ignored. What is it that God has done for us that we may be forgetting or ignoring? I'd like to start today's conversation by going back to our panelists who began the discussion.
Yeah, I love this whole context. I love the book of Micah, and this is just an awesome passage. It's the picture, you get the picture of a courtroom, and God is on trial, and the folks are complaining. And I think at the end of the day, the Lord basically lets them know that he's innocent. In fact, in verse 3, he says, "My people, what have I done to you, and how have I wearied you? Answer me." And the righteous acts of the Lord are revealed in that context. He says in verse 5, so that you might know the righteous acts of the Lord. The Lord talks about how he redeemed the people of God, how he sent them leaders, Moses, Miriam, and Aaron. And so he lays this defense, if you will, and he's acquitted that, you know, I'm innocent. I've been a great God to you. I'm a good God to you. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful display of the Lord communicating with his people, trying to get them to see that God is an innocent God. And then the wonderful verse in verse 8, what does the Lord require of you? But to do the right thing. He says here in Micah 6 and 8 that we need to certainly love justice. We need to love mercy and be just. And to be just, basically what the Lord is saying there, as I understand it, is to be fair in an unfair world. We live in an unfair world, and as people of God, we need to make sure that we're just and that we seek justice for people, justice for all. And then, of course, to love mercy. Be kind. Be kind. I mean, I think in certain spaces in society, we've gotten away from the whole concept of being kind. I remember when I went out of the country to on a mission trip to a particular place that was not. They were not Christians, and whenever someone came to Christ, it was so bad. The people would be so marginalized, where they wanted us in the U.S. to just go over there to be kind to these individuals and to go to the movies with them, not necessarily open up a Bible and disciple them and teach them the word, but just to be kind to them. And so there are many places in the world where folks are just in need of kind acts, kindness, acts of kindness. And that's what I think is missing in the world. And this is still required of us today. We still should see it today. And then, of course, to walk humbly with our God. I think a lot of our problems that we get ourselves into individually and as a nation is the lack of humility. The lack of humility. You know, we have to walk humbly with our God. And then, you know, that's kind of interesting, because if you're walking with God, I don't think there's any other way to walk with God but humbly, because you're in the presence of the Almighty. So it's a great passage. I do think that the indictment can certainly be made when you look at different quarters, because people have gotten away from this principle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. What a wonderful way to start the conversation. I'd make 2 points. One is to underline what you have already said about the fact that the context of Micah 6:8 is communal. It is not about individual faith. This is about community action and community behavior. And consequently, you know, I believe that the death of true religion is to reduce it to individual behavior. That as long as I kind of do what I can to not act unjustly toward people, as long as I kind of am kind to as many people as I can be kind to, and as long as I avoid theological arrogance, which is the opposite of walking humbly with God, then all's going to be fine. But if this truly is a text that comes out of the communal context, then we are all challenged to create communities of justice, to create communities in which kindness is the way that people walk all the time with each other, in relationship to each other, and that theological arrogance is anathema, that we never allow God to be put in anybody's box by whatever label, and however righteous we feel we are in doing so. We cannot capture God. And you know, I see those kinds of things happening. I see people working for I see people working in soup kitchens, in food pantries. I see people opening up counseling centers to help in all sorts of ways. I see people advocating against the death penalty. I see people advocating, people in community, creating community conversations about race, community conversations about how can we heal the divisions caused by you name the problems that we're having. People in the streets, people doing public service. You know, sometimes we poop on our public servants too often. Those who hold elected office and those who work in government in other capacities, from law enforcement to public school teachers to whatever. I think that each of us is responsible not only for our own just, kind, humble walk, but also for creating community in which that takes place.
Thank you. Rabbi.
So in the Talmud, there's a famous passage where they say, you know, all of the entirety of the Torah can be encapsulated in this verse in 11 things or 10 things. So they say Micah did it with 3 things. That the whole Torah is embodied in these 3 things. And so they go through, well, what does it mean to do justly? Well, that's fairly straightforward, right? To make sure that the world is more fair, more equitable. And then to love mercy, they say that's doing Gimilut Chasadim, doing acts of loving kindness. But then they talk about this idea of what does it mean to walk humbly with your God? And they say this is the tasks of arranging for funerals for the indigent and for helping brides who can't afford to pay for their weddings. Why is that an expression of humility before God? And they say because those are public things that you do for which you're not supposed to expect any fanfare or anything in return. And so they say that things that you do in public with humility should you do things in private with humility. And that the things that you do ought not be transactional. That what it means to live a good, moral, ethical life is to have that balance. And if you look in Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah puts justice and loving kindness, tzedek and chesed, as balancing forces with each other that you have to hold in both hands to create that sense of balance. But once you create that sense of balance, then you need to pursue your life not because of what it's going to do for you individually, not because of the transactional nature of what it's going to allow for your own advancement, but because it is the right thing. And I think that element of humility, that idea, well, why do I do what I do? Because that's the right thing to do. Not because it's going to get me a trophy, and not because I'm going to get a headline in a newspaper, or not because people are going to pat me on the back and say, way to go, Dan. It's because if no one knew about it, it's still doing the right thing that's going to make a difference in the world.
Excellent.
This is all very interesting. I don't know whether to start with the question or make a comment first. I think my question is this. These verses in the original context were directed toward not only a religious community, but a political community. So my question is this kind of a verse directed toward our political community in the United States? Or is it just directed to those of us who are people of faith? That's the kind of question that I was wrestling with. Is this just strictly for those of us who are, if you will, in the community? Yeah, it's communal. And I understand that our faith community affects the larger community, but who is this directed to? Is this directed to our governing officials who may not be Christian? You say yes, okay. So that's one question I had. But so what's interesting is that if memory serves, I believe that the New Testament, in our lectionary system, we have readings in Episcopal, Lutheran, Catholic. I imagine you do too, don't you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the parallel verse that's with this particular passage is Philippians 2, where it talks about Jesus who, being in the form of God, empties himself, right for the sake of humanity, and doesn't consider equality with God something to be grasped. So there's this profound sense of humility that even godness is completely emptied in Christ, giving himself in service to the world in the interest of justice and mercy, bringing people back to God through faith. And to me, what's interesting is that whole section starts with, in Philippians, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, being in the form of God, emptied himself." And so this passage always for me connects me to, Christologically, to Christ as my model for how is it that I can empty myself in the interest of my neighbor and consider the neighbor to be more important than myself. And I think obviously justice, fairness, kindness, mercy, those all, but I think that's kind of where I was going with my kind of sense of what this means for our contemporary community. But I still don't know about the political issue.
Let me answer your question. I think that because this was an answer to a political question as much as a theological question, this is Micah, this is this ancient source saying to us, this ancient voice through whom we hopefully will be blessed enough to hear a word from God, this ancient voice saying to us that this is the way the world works best. And that doesn't have any boundaries on it. This is the way Christians or Jews understand that the world works best, but this is the way the world works best. It is a part of a global conversation with many different faith groups, yes, but this is a pretty darn good way to go.
Kind of a form of natural law? I don't want to put words in your mouth. But.
I think Micah might say that if he understood what you mean by natural law.
Yeah.
But wasn't this more of a religious nation than a political nation?
Well, I think that part of what is so extraordinary about this message is the simplicity, right? It's not so complicated. It's almost like, what Moses says to the Israelites when he's taking leave of them, right? Lo bashamayim hi, right? This thing is not in heaven, right? This thing is not across the sea. It's in your mouth and in your heart that you can do it. It's simple. Act justly, love loving kindness, and recognize you don't have a monopoly on the truth and you don't know everything. One of the great truths that comes out of the 12 steps in AA is when you say, I realized that my life was unmanageable and I had to turn my life over to a power greater than me. And it was through that I could restore my sense of sanity, I could find my sense of spiritual wholeness and wellness. And I think that that's not just true for someone who's trying to overcome the throes of addiction. I think that's true for a society that's addicted to power and to greed and all of those horrible things that rip us apart. That if we can just do these three basic things, then we can achieve that which God needs for us to accomplish in our life.
Yes, and also I'll add, loving mercy wherever you find it. I think that's important, not just within ourselves, but it's when you are to love mercy. Look for it in other places and celebrate it when you see it, and celebrate justice when you see it, no matter where you find it.
Yeah, I think one of the most profound examples of this sort of thing happening in the world today is in interfaith conversation, where people come not to persuade, but to listen and to appreciate that the one who is very different, the one who comes from a different context with a different set of ancient voices speaking to them, Scripture, and still tries to appreciate, to learn, to be taught by. And that's when we become more human. That's when we learn more about God.
Thank you. Time for a break.
We hope you're enjoying today's program. If you'd like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's AmericanReligious.org. There you can read about the vision and history of the program, and we invite you to become a ministry partner, explore our Town Hall Estates healthcare facilities, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, we look forward to receiving your letters. You may write us at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. If you have a prayer request, please send it to prayerrequest@americanreligious.org. Thank you for writing and thank you for watching. Now, back to today's closing statements.
Thank you and welcome back to the last part of our program today. As I've been listening to the group, I've been thinking, is this a three-legged stool? Justice, mercy, walking humbly? Is it one more prominent than the other, especially today? I don't know. And that may not be in the mind of our panelists as we finish, but it's in mine. Tom.
Thank you. I think it's fair to say that our communities have failed. Our communities do fail in their responsibilities to bring us together, to keep us safe and healthy. Not that they always fail, but they do fail. And they are rightly informed by these precepts if we can all simply repeat them together, that doing justice, loving mercy, avoiding putting God in a box and declaring that I've got the only way into that box, that I know what God's all about, walking humbly with God. Those sorts of things propel us forward as a species and make life better on this earth.
Andrea, I think that I think that this is not three ways of being. I think it's one way of being that encompass all three. And I mean, that's just my kind of gut instinct. If the whole Talmud summed up here, it's a summation of everything. Nothing can be more important than the other. But the other thing I want to add to what you have to say, because I agree that we failed, and I agree that our response is this trifold path. But I do think that the whole book of Micah talks about what God has done for God's people. And so I do think that our remembering and receiving from God what God has done for us is the empowering piece that allows us to carry out what He commands us to do.
Yeah, and the third question, what has God done for us, or what may we be forgetting or ignoring? In my context of preaching, we always like to tell folks, hey, the Lord woke us up this morning, started us on our way, and that's something to be thankful for. We woke up this morning with our minds on Christ. He gave us eyes through which we see, ears to hear with, a tongue to talk with, hands where we can feel things, feet to walk. I think these are the things that we take for granted, and we should just, always be mindful of the fact that the Lord has blessed us. He has blessed us. We can breathe. If you ever had asthma and had to take, gasping for air, you'll be thankful for the oxygen that the Lord gives us. So we have so much to be thankful for, and we should not forget the mercy that the Lord gives us. He tells us to be merciful, but wow, He is merciful to us, and He is just, and He walks with us. Isn't that beautiful? We are to walk with Him, but wow, the Lord walks with us as well. And I think these are things we should keep prominent in our minds.
So it's interesting, when you look in the Hebrew of this verse, two things jump out at me. One is, it doesn't ask you, do you know what God asks of you? No, it says, you all know what God asks of you. This is not news to you. But the other thing that jumped out at me when I looked in the Hebrew is the word for modesty, walk humbly, is this word hatznea, which comes from the root tzniut, which means modesty. Tzniut, when they talk about tzniut in Jewish law, they're talking about dressing modestly, right? Not uncovering or exposing something in a way that would be to desecrate it. It's a way of acknowledging that what lies beneath is sacred, and so you cover it to attend to its sacredness. And one of the things that I think Micah is trying to say to his generation and to our generation is, don't forget that your own self and the person next to you and the person across the country from you is holy and sacred. And that if you can attend to that ideal of the sacredness of every individual, then the other things should flow fairly simply from that. If I am able to look at you as a sacred being, I'm going to do justly by you. If I'm able to look at you as a sacred individual, I will be in love with you and I will act with kindness toward you. And it is the cultivation of that sense of modesty of one's own self, one's limitations, that I think opens the heart to create the holiness that we want to see in the world.
And thank you, and that's an excellent place to end, on the sacredness of every human being, or what we see, and how does that impact the way we react. So I think to you viewers today, I hope this has been a really helpful insight into the book of Micah. Maybe that's something you just want to sit down and read sometimes, and just look at what is being said there. And then maybe ask the questions to yourself that we have asked today. Are the things that God has done for us that we have forgotten, or that we've been ignoring, and that in the natural way of looking inward, we have forgotten to look at what God has given to us, but not just us, but what He has given to others, and how does that relate to the way we treat others and the way we see others. And then, of course, those three important phrases: how are we doing? And how are we doing in helping our community act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly? The Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestant, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And now, friends, until next time, next week, and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.